Welcome to UVA Today, Cavalanche with Chris Graham. I am your host, Jeff Fife, with AugustaFreePress.com editor, Chris Graham. Chris, how you feeling today?
Hey, great, Jeff. Getting ready for Super Regional weekend. A lot going on in UVA sports, which we'll cover in the podcast this week.
Yeah, a lot in the podcast this week when we talk a little about UVA's journey to the Super Regional, talk about UVA's pitching and how dominant it's been and can it carry the offense. Also take a look at Maryland and what we can expect from them. And, of course, a lot of other UVA news. In the final segment, we'll talk a little about Tony Bennett's contract and what football is going to look like this year. But let's start with what everybody is talking about, UVA baseball. Their journey to the Super Regional, you've been following them all season long. You went to the regional there, covering it for Augusta Free Press, your sports for all UVA sports. Tell us about what you expect to see with UVA coming up this weekend.
Well, from the UVA perspective, they're playing a team that's an ACC rival, but they've only seen once this year, and that was in Greensboro just a couple weeks ago. And Maryland actually won that game. So here we're talking about a team that is the top national seed left in the tournament, playing against a team that was not even a number one seed in its own regional, but they have the upper hand in the series. But the Maryland team, and we'll talk more about Maryland in an upcoming segment in depth, but they cannot be overlooked. It's their first Super Regional appearance in program history, only their third NCAA tournament appearance. So this is a program that is clearly having its best season ever. But you can't overlook the fact that they went to Columbia, South Carolina, the home of the University of South Carolina Gamecocks, who won a couple of national championships not that long ago, back-to-back seasons back in, I think it was 2010, 2011, and actually won that regional, swept South Carolina in 2 games. South Carolina had not lost a home regional NCAA tournament game in 10 years. And Maryland went down there and won 2 games and actually won the deciding game very decisively, a 10-1 win on Sunday night. So from that perspective, this is the kind of thing that if UVA needed something to get the team's attention focused on this weekend, what Maryland did to South Carolina, a team that knocked UVA out of the College World Series back in 2011, UVA's got the attention is there. From UVA's perspective, though, it's not like they're going in limping. They went into the NCAA tournament limping quite a bit, having lost their last weekend series of the regular season to Wake Forest and losing 2 of 3 in ACC tournament play, including blowing a lead against Florida State in a game that kind of left a bad taste in everybody's mouth. I think they used that as motivation. Brian O'Connor talked after every press conference last week about how he had never seen his team so focused as they were in practice last week. They did a couple scrimmages on Tuesday and Wednesday leading into the Friday first game with Bucknell. And he said he'd never seen his hitters particularly more focused. An offense that struggled a lot this season with a few guys who were expected to be top picks in that lineup, really anchoring that lineup, scoring 5.4 runs per game this year after scoring 7.9 runs per game last year, and down the stretch scoring 4.5 runs a game in their last 2 weekends. He said actually last week, considering UVA's pitching staff, which is one of the top in the country, 2.36 ERA going into last weekend, he said, usually in scrimmages, the offense has a tough time against Nathan Kirby and Brandon Waddell and Artie Lewicki and the rest of that group. But actually, the offense actually dominated the pitching and defense last week in the scrimmages. So he felt good going into last weekend. And then you saw that play out in the Charlottesville Regional, a 10-1 win in the opener over Bucknell. A 3-0 win in the second game in the winner's bracket final over Arkansas on Saturday night. Deceptive, only 3-0. But Virginia had 10 hits in that game and really left some guys on base, but did consistently hit the ball hard in that game, just could not get the runs across in the numbers they liked. But they didn't have a problem with that on Sunday night. And in a 9-2 win, the Cavs really opened up the offense there. So a weekend where 5 of the top 8 national seeds fell, including the top 2 national seeds in Oregon State and Florida. Virginia wins the weekend, outscoring its opponents 22-3. So that's about. I've seen now. This is the 4th Super Regional I've seen in person. The 5th time now in 6 years that we'll see the Virginia team in Super Regionals. This, of the regional championships that they've had in the last 6 years, this by far the most impressive. So I think Virginia goes in strong. Maryland goes in strong. It should be a great weekend.
It's interesting that we do have, again coming into this series, into this super regional, all those teams you mentioned that have dropped now. Is Virginia the favorite to not only advance but win the College World Series?
Well, at this stage, you'd have to say yes. They're the number 3 national seed, but they are the top national seed still left, and they won very convincingly. I mean, even another team that didn't make it, LSU, the number 4 national seed. The ESPNU commentators were talking on Sunday afternoon about how dominant they'd been to get to the stage of their regional championship final. Then they lose 2 games to Houston and don't make it to the Super Regionals. Virginia, you did what you were supposed to do when you're a top national seed hosting at home. You go out and you blow out the opposition, and they did this weekend. So, yeah, they've got to be. I mean, you got Nathan Kirby at the number 1 starting position. He'll start on Saturday. And this series starts Saturday. It's odd. We're the top national seed, but we play Saturday and Sunday at noon. So we lead things off as far as this goes on TV. Both games ESPN2. But Nathan Kirby, 9-1 record. He had not won, though. He had not gotten a decision and a win in over a month because he had 3 straight games that the bullpen either blew leads and lost a game, or a team came back and tied it off the bullpen and UVA won the game. But a 9-1 record, an ERA under 1.4. He's clearly, as a sophomore, if he were coming out this year in the draft, he'd be a first-round pick based on the number of scouts at games and behind the plate pointing radar guns at him whenever he throws the ball. But you got Nathan Kirby, who's been dominant at number 1. Right now, Artie Lewicki will probably be the number 2 starter, which is interesting. Artie started this season on college teams don't have DLs, disabled list, but he would have started the season on the DL if there were in college. Coming off really surgery that was done 2 years ago, had Tommy John surgery done 2 years ago. He pitched a couple of games, limited outings last year in relief, but this year came back and had other issues related to the aftermath of that Tommy John surgery. So his whole season was spent getting ready for postseason. Throwing an inning, then 2 innings, then 3 innings, then a pitch count that allowed him to get up to 5 innings. Finally, the Wake Forest series, he pitched, I think it was 7 innings in a game. He actually won the only game of that series that UVA won. He pitched 5+ against Maryland in the ACC tournament, so he has obviously pitched against them. They've seen him. He's seen them. But Artie will be the number 2 starter, a 6-1 record, a below 2 ERA. And then number 3, if you get that far, Brandon Waddell. He's the if necessary starter on Monday, but he was your number 1 starter last year on a team that was a super regional team. So you talk about deep pitching staffs in baseball, and UVA has the best pitching staff left of anybody. And I think they even had the best pitching staff before last weekend. But when you talk about top 3 guys, rotation guys, they've got Josh Sabors, who was a Saturday starter all season long. He's now in short relief, which is a role last year he played and played very well. He was a 7th and 8th inning setup man last year, 3-0 record, 1.98 ERA out of the bullpen. You've got Whit Mayberry, an under 2 ERA. He's been the 8th inning guy all season long. You've got the best closer in college baseball, Nick Howard, likely this week, Thursday or Friday, will be a first or second round pick in the MLB draft as a junior. 99-mile-an-hour fastball, slider that drops off the table. He closes games out for you. So, pitching-wise, the hitters they only have to score a couple of runs. That's why this team has done what they have done with an offense that only scores 5 runs a game, because that they don't need much more than that. So, really interesting the way things set up. I think this is a team that could really be dominant.
Well, excellent. We're definitely looking forward to this weekend's games. And when we come back to UVA Today, Cavalanche with Chris Graham, we'll take a look at the competition a little bit more deeper into the history of Virginia in the College World Series.
Businesses, what do you do to get your word out? The web, Facebook, TV, radio, print ads? That's all important, but do you have a cohesive marketing strategy? Augusta Free Press can help you get everything pointing in the right direction. Sales. Call us today at 540-949-6574 or visit us online at afpbusiness.com.
We're back. UVA Today, Cavalanche with Chris Graham. We've taken an in-depth look at Virginia. Nice balanced attack with pitching. And now let's take a look at Maryland. What can we expect with our soon-to-be exiting out ACC foes?
I've seen some people on Saber.com message board suggest that maybe Maryland should leave that exit fee check in Davenport on their way out the door. But yeah, that's interesting that Maryland in its last ACC season will play another ACC team in the Super Regionals. Just what an interesting way to go for Maryland in that sense. Going as deep as you possibly can on their way out of the ACC, because that relationship ends formally at midnight on June 30th. This team is a team that's built a lot like Virginia. They're a team that scores right about 5.5 runs a game, like Virginia does. They hit 270 as a team. Virginia hits 278 as a team. But they're pitching heavy, to say the least. Now Virginia's team ERA as of after last weekend is now down to 2.29, whereas Maryland is 3.40. But that's Virginia being more an outlier than Maryland being egregiously bad. The ACC average ERA this year was over 4, like 4.15. So Maryland is a team built on pitching. Jake Stinnett is their stud. The 7-6-1 loss record, the traditional baseball stat, the baseball card stat as we call it, doesn't stand out. His 2.65 ERA does stand out, and 130 strikeouts, 112 innings pitched also stands out. And also what stands out is he owns a win over Virginia this year back in the ACC tournament. He pitched 8 innings, gave up 4 runs in that game, and what turned out to be a 7-6 win for UVA. Mike Shallren and Jake Drossner are your other two big starters that could see this weekend. ERA is also under 3, so all 3 of your starters, weekend starters, are sub-3 ERA guys. But getting back to the offense, the 5.5 runs per game, this is a team that hit 19 home runs as a team this year. And just for comparison, again, Virginia hit 33 home runs as a team this year. And this seemed like a little bit of an off year for UVA. Mike Pappy, for example, has 10 home runs by himself. Actually, 11 home runs now when you count his home run this past weekend in the regionals. So this is not a team that pounds the ball. They're a team that plays small ball. Very much like Virginia. In some way, 2 mirror image teams. Maybe the only difference is that Virginia is better at it. But again, these two teams played one game, and Maryland won that game this year.
How important is that first game?
I think it's it's important in the sense of I think from Maryland's perspective, they go in with some confidence because they won the game. They didn't get blown out in the game. They actually did win the game. It's important to Brian O'Connor for a different reason. I think he used that terrible stretch at the end of the regular season to motivate his team last week to play as well as they did last weekend. I think because Brian O'Connor he's a guy that's a master of motivation with his team in that clubhouse. And if they had played another ACC team that maybe if they played Georgia Tech, for example, Virginia swept Georgia Tech in 3 games, and it was a pretty easy 3-game sweep. It might have been hard for him to get their attention going into this weekend. I mean, it's a super regional weekend, everything else, but it may have been hard to get them motivated as much as saying we've played Maryland once and they beat us. I think there's got to be a confidence factor a bit, even though, again, Stinnett got the win in that one game. He's their ace, and they had to pitch him 8 innings, 126 pitches to get a 7-6 win out of that game. Maryland needed those wins. They needed the wins over Virginia and Florida State to even get in the NCAA tournament. Now they're in the Super Regionals. They had to use Stinnett the way they did to get him, deep into that game. So Virginia's got to say, hey, we hit him pretty well in the ACC tournament. A different factor is, I said Maryland had 19 home runs this season as a team. They had 3 in that game in Greensboro. And having been to that stadium, Bank One Ballpark Stadium, it's small. The lines, it's 320 down the lines. It's 390 to center field. It's a minor league baseball park, but the dimensions are small. Davenport is anything but small. 340 down the lines, 408 to center with that 40-foot batter's eye that's in play. Don't have a lot of home runs in Davenport. So Virginia lost that game. It was a very atypical game. The number 1 starter goes 126 pitches into a game. Maryland, a team that has 19 home runs all season, hits 3 in that game. Maryland won the game, but I think that there are a lot of factors that make you think that it was an aberration kind of game.
Now, obvious home court advantage when you hit JPJ, loud, obnoxious crowd having a good old time. Maryland brings out the best in UVA fans. Does Davenport give us that same home field advantage, and what can we expect out of the fans? And folks that may not have been to a baseball game yet this season, if they showed up, what can they expect out of the fan base and out of the energy at Davenport?
I'll tell you it's a little bit longer story, so I'll try to compress it down. I was a student at UVA from 1990 to 1994, and two of my roommates were baseball players, and one was a starting pitcher, a weekend starter. So we went to a lot of his starts, and Davenport back then, for folks listening in who've been to their local high school field, our reference point for that is Kate Collins Field in Waynesboro, where we're based, has two sets of bleachers behind home plate. That's pretty much what Davenport was back in the 1990s. It was two sets of bleachers behind home plate, and there was a lot of green grass. You could sit on a hill, just like you can at Kate Collins Field, like you can at a lot of high school fields. There would be 50 people at ACC games. Literally, if you heckled, like being a college kid, we heckled a lot. The players knew who was heckling because there weren't many people heckling. They could look at you and say, "You're the one who called me Spanky," for example. It's a different atmosphere now. UVA baseball, the Davenport has capacity of 5,100 now with bleachers out in left field and right field. They've extended bleachers down the right field line, down the first base line. It's a different place. People tailgate before games. There are more people tailgating for baseball games than I think there are for football games, just for comparison's sake. It's an interesting environment. The UVA crowd has its own little sayings. For example, when an opposing pitcher throws a ball in the dirt, there's a loud chant of dirt ball, that's unique to Davenport. The big scoreboard out there, the dimensions are conducive to what Brian O'Connor wants to do, which is build a team on pitching and defense. But the fans do create an interesting environment, and there's always 5,000 people at the game, and Maryland will get its allotment of tickets. It may be 500 or so tickets that Maryland gets access to for this. The other 4,500 will be taken up by rabid UVA fans who. Last weekend, the way these games were played on Sunday night, the final games in Columbia where Maryland beat South Carolina and Charlottesville where UVA beat Arkansas to get to this round, were being played at roughly the same time. Maryland was a few innings ahead of us. They were finishing up their 10-1 win. I think the UVA Arkansas game was in about the fourth or fifth inning. UVA's already up 6-0 in that game. We could already start thinking ahead. UVA is going to play Maryland, and all I could hear, the buzz in the stands was tremendous. I think UVA fans would have loved to have played South Carolina. There's a history there between those two programs in recent years. But the buzz about Maryland was something that I did not anticipate, but it was very interesting. I think that place is going to be humming this weekend.
I think so as well, and it'll be an excellent opportunity to send Maryland on their merry way. We'll see them again next year in basketball with the Big Ten ACC Challenge.
As it turns out.
But this is going to be a great opportunity. Now, speaking of history, in the College World Series, in the O'Connor era, lots of history of getting there, but we've sort of been the bridesmaid and never the bride.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about UVA's history in hosting some of these super regionals and some of our experience, and does that experience help us move forward this year?
It helps put the team in a position to move forward, no question. I mean, that question was brought up to Brian O'Connor this past weekend at the regionals. They've now won 5 regionals in 6 years, and they had not won a regional before that. And being back to the dance, how the order of songs, the steps and everything else. He knew what to do. To get. He used his number 3 starter Friday last week, and then number 1, number 2. I mean, there's certain things you do. You rest your bullpen. You use your A bullpen in certain situations. You don't use them in certain situations. Getting ready for this weekend, I even think he took Nathan Kirby out of his start Saturday night. 8 innings, 1 hit, no earned runs. Maybe the best performance I've ever seen in a big game situation, maybe ever. Maybe compared to Tom Glavine in Game 6 in the World Series back in '95 for the Atlanta Braves when they won that World Series, who also pitched 8 innings, gave up 1 hit, no runs in a World Series clinching win. Kirby was that good. 96 pitches, and you're thinking, me in the stand, in the stands press box, I'm thinking they're going to bring Kirby back out. When he didn't, it occurred to me later, there's a reason he didn't bring him back out, and it's because he's saving those pitches for next week. And so that's experience, not overusing your pitchers because the season's a long season, and you want to make sure to save an inning or two when you can. And so, it does. Getting ready this week. Maryland, this is their first super regional ever. And there's a lot of hoopla, I'm sure, up in College Park and surrounding that Maryland program about the fact, hey, this is the first time we've ever been there. It's a big deal. toning out that hoopla, whereas Virginia, this is what you expect when you're at Virginia. You expect to be in the Super Regionals, and O'Connor talked about that after last Sunday night's win. This program, it would have been a failed season if they had not made it this far, and I think it would be a failed season if they didn't make it to the College World Series, to be honest. And so, yeah, I think it does help. And Maryland, not to say that they're going in completely overwhelmed. It's just, how much are they dealing with ticket requests? How much are they dealing with, we've never practiced this late in the season. We're used to now being either at our summer league assignments or getting ready for the draft. How much of that factors in? It may be a factor. We'll see.
Now, you'll be there this weekend covering all of the games. What can folks expect from AugustaFreePress.com? How do they stay engaged and involved?
We do a good job, I think, with the live blogs. I'd love to be doing play-by-play of the games and telling you what we're thinking as it happens and kind of anticipating situations as they are getting ready to come up. But we can do that with a live blog just as well. And we will bring up different things we see. There's something about being in the stadium. My seat on press row, I'm literally on the concourse right behind home plate. I feel the game in a different way maybe than I even would in the press box. But there were things that popped up last weekend. For example, when Arkansas started, the game 3 starter they used was a relief pitcher all season, making only his second start of the season. Now, he came in with a 1.80 ERA. My question, even before the first pitch, was how long does this guy last? And his first 2 innings goes 1, 2, 3, and maybe this Arkansas guy, hey, maybe the coach knows what he's talking about here. He rolled the dice and got a good performance out of his guy. 3rd inning, 6 runs. So we bring those kind of things up on our live blogs before they happen, and it's our job to help you think a little bit about those kind of things. And so we'll live blog during the games. So keep up with that, but also after the games, of course, we're down there with both coaching staffs, both sets of players that are brought out, asking questions, getting on some of the key parts of the game. We'll share those videos afterwards. We'll also write columns afterwards, giving insight, and of course the recaps and everything else. But this is it's something we try to give the most in-depth coverage as possible out there. For me being one guy, I think you'd think there are 2 or 3 of us out there, but we really do try to get in there and get in depth into the coverage. And this weekend will be no different. Noon Saturday, noon Sunday, if necessary Monday. We'll be there. We'll be there early because you got to get there early. We'll be there, and I've done it. We've done this. Fortunately, we've had experience doing this in past years. We also had a great run in basketball this year. Went up to ACC tournament down to Raleigh and then up to Madison Square Garden. It'll whenever this train comes to a stopping point, it'll be a sad time because there'll be a few months in between now and football and it's been a really successful UVA sports season these past couple of sports seasons.
And there is news on the basketball front, and we'll cover that the next segment when we come back from UVA Today Cavalanche with Chris Graham.
The web world is moving to WordPress. Don't get left behind. WordPress sites are easy to manage and update without needing a professional to do that work for you. Let Augusta Free Press take you into the WordPress world. Call us today at 540-949-6574 or look us up online at afpbusiness.com.
We're back. UVA Today Cavalanche with Chris Graham. Been covering a lot of UVA baseball, but some other news recently has popped up on UVA sports front. Tony Bennett signs an extension with the men's basketball UVA Cavaliers. Talk a little bit about that extension and what led to us getting to this point.
I think the biggest surprise is the number, the total number, the $1.924 million a year number that he signed for. It's still less than what Buzz Williams is getting at Virginia Tech. Buzz Williams hasn't won a game at Virginia Tech, and he seemed to think they're a sleeping giant down there in Blacksburg. I think he must think he's coaching the football team because the basketball program has really only had 3 or 4 good seasons in the last 3 or 4 decades. But Bennett seemed to emphasize, and we've talked about this. I think we talked about this during the first Cavalanche show back during the run to the Sweet 16. He seemed to value more that his assistants got paid than that. He got a 13% raise, so it's not like he didn't get a raise himself. But nothing near the close to $3 million a year territory that other elite coaches get. He's less than $2 million a year. Now with incentives, there's potential. Like this year, he had close to $700,000 in incentives, I think. So he made out well for the team winning and getting as far as it did. But that said, he could have certainly raked Craig Littlepage and others over the coals as much as he wanted to, and basically gotten what he wanted. And what he wanted was more money for Richie McKay, his associate head coach, who left the job at Liberty to become the associate head coach several years ago. Jason Williford, a former UVA player who's been a really successful recruiter, especially on Bennett's staff. Ron Sanchez. They've even created another staff position. So that's what was said to me a few months ago, back still during the season, talking with Wally Walker, who I'd interviewed for the book that I wrote, Mad About You, 4 Decades of Basketball at University Hall. Good book, by the way. It's still available. There's still copies available. Go to the Augusta Free Press website. You can actually find out how you can order a copy. But I talked to Wally on the phone several years ago, so I see him at the Syracuse game in March and just thought, hey, it's Wally Walker. Got to go introduce myself. It's been years. He probably, I'm sure, does not remember the fact that I did the book. He was nice and acted like he did. But the conversation turned to, what do you think about Tony? Because at that point, the Syracuse game, they just won the regular season championship. What's going to take to keep him here? And Wally said, you'll be surprised. Tony's not a money guy. He's a loyalty guy. He's going to think most about his assistants. He's going to worry about himself later. 3 months later, that's what happened. So there may be some fans out there listening in who've been on the Sabre and other places saying, why did we sign him for that? You know, he's just going to leave us. No, he's not going to. This is what Tony wanted. Tony wanted stability for himself, which 7-year contract he's now signed through 2021. That just seems so far out in the distance. He signed that long, and he's got money for his guys. So for him, the stability of knowing that Richie McKay will be there at his side, Jason Williford, until, you know, I'm sure at some point other programs are going to realize, hey, Richie McKay is a key guy on Tony Bennett's staff at UVA. Look at what they've done. Let's try to hire him for our job. But if UVA can be competitive and keep him there as long as possible, then Tony Bennett and the UVA program will be successful. So they've done what they needed to do.
And it's good that off season being able to wrap that up leading into when basketball season starts out. Looks like early preseason prognostications going to have us in the top 25, top 4 in the ACC. Before we step into the other revenue sport program, any early predictions for way UVA is going to come out of the gate and what the national media is going to be looking at them this year?
Those early polls that you see done by the likes of CBS and ESPN and such, I saw a early poll of polls. What do you call that? The poll of polls kind of thing, where you kind of average out those early polls. And there are about 10 of them that are out there that were averaged out. UVA came in number 6 in those early polls. And this is before this snapshot was taken before guys either left early for the NBA or didn't, and Duke lost Jabari Parker after this. So you know, UVA will be top 5, top 10 in the early polls. When you return 7 of your top 9 contributors, and UVA loses Akil Mitchell and Joe Harris, those are 2 big losses, but you return 7 of your top 9. You bring in Hall, the point guard who sat out last year, who now people are talking about him starting this year. So coming in from being a redshirt to starting and maybe joining London Perrantes in a 2-point guard backcourt. And then you bring in the recruiting class that includes Wilkins and Stith, who, yes, their daddies were Wilkins and Stiths, if you can associate those names. A recruiting class that is one of the top in the ACC. You got a Tennessee transfer coming in who can only play in practice, but you know we saw what Anthony Gill did in a year of practice, transferring from South Carolina. You're talking about a team that's got 13 or 14 guys that are going to be vying for minutes, and of course there's only probably 8 or 9 guys that will get minutes. So the practices will be very competitive. This will be a deeper team than last year's team. Only one of those guys I've talked about. You're talking about 14 guys competing for minutes. Only one of them is a senior, and that's Darion Atkins, who's not going to start. This is a team that's loaded for the next 3 or 4 years. So, you know, this season, the surprise that was the Cavs season, 16-2 running the ACC, winning the ACC tournament, everything else. Those of us around the program said, wait about the team in 2. This team's good. The team in 2 years will be tremendous. This year's team won 30 games. I don't. The ceiling is unlimited for the next 2 or 3 years for UVA basketball.
Excitement and momentum with baseball, excitement and momentum with basketball. Let's talk about football.
Can we cue the Debbie Downer music here? Yeah. Whack, whack.
What do you think? Are we? What's the over/under on wins this year? And are we looking at an extension for London at the end of this season?
Over under 2.
2.
I don't think that's being mean. That's got to be, because I've proposed the number 3 at times in the media room during basketball and baseball season, and I've gotten people rolling their eyes at me when I say 3.
We'll get the UCLA game.
Yeah, UCLA game. Yeah. Richmond, the second game's Richmond, and Richmond comes in with probably better quarterbacks who have UVA pedigrees than we do. Michael Rocco and Michael Strauss. Strauss last year started. Rocco had to redshirt, but Michael Strauss, both those guys are UVA transfers who went to Richmond. Strauss threw for 4,000 yards. I mean, come on. So the Richmond game's not even a given. That game with the MAC team, I think it's Kent State. That will not be a given. And then they scheduled a tremendously difficult schedule. UCLA, BYU. UCLA's at home, I guess, at least, right? But, they won 10 games. They won 9 regular season games, won their bowl game against Virginia Tech. That said, I mean, there's a lot of talent in that program, and that's the hard thing for those of us who watch this program closely to reconcile. You're on the heels of 4 basically top 30 recruiting classes in the country. You've got Grayson Lambert, who was a top recruit at quarterback coming out of high school, that you had offers from Georgia and Alabama. He's now going to be a starting quarterback. You had 2 top 10 consensus top 10 recruits come in this year from in this year's class. There's talent in the pipeline. I just don't know if this coaching staff is the coaching staff to translate that talent. And as young as this team is, if this schedule that was put together by John Oliver, Associate AD for Athletics, now on his way out the door, he put together a schedule that a team that is competing for one of those 4 spots in the BCS tournament. It's not BCS anymore, but that football playoffs tournament would be proud of, because it would be the kind of schedule that could get you some ratings points. But when you're on the other end of football, you don't need ratings points. You need W's, and there's just not a lot of W's within the conference. And so I've talked about UCLA and BYU among your non-conference games. It just happens to be the year that we travel to Tallahassee. Good luck on that. Defending national champs coming back with most of their talent, looking for a repeat. The whole coastal, Virginia's in the coastal division. I mean, there's not an easy out. We're the easy out in the coastal right now. Duke used to be the easy out. They won 10 games this year. Miami's going to be better. Virginia Tech. You got, even Pitt. Pitt beat us this year, and Pitt was a team competing for a bowl spot. There's nothing easy on that schedule. So this team could play really well and win 4 games. And that's not going. Not only is it not going to get London an extension, it's going to get him fired. I mean, I think at this point, anything less than 6 wins, and that's my over/under for London to keep his job is 6 wins. If he wins 6 games, they might want to erect a statue out in front of Scott Stadium to him, because this schedule's tough. The team's young. It's unproven. 2 or 3 is about what you're going to get. It's going to be a long year.
Well, we'll keep the memory. We'll hold fast the memory of baseball and basketball season and survive football. But you can do that with us every week, as we're going to be releasing UVA Today Cavalanche with Chris Graham. Another great podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Fife, with the Augusta Free Press editor, Chris Graham. Great having you with us again this week. Good luck to UVA baseball this weekend, and stay tuned in to AugustaFreePress.com for all your UVA sports.